One thing that I think gamers can generally agree upon is the fact that these development studios and publishers all make mistakes, some of which are so colossal that they'll go down in the annals of history. But today, I want to talk about one specifically, and that is going to be good old EA. Let's discuss this. Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is AJ. Now, in regards to EA, they are notorious for making anti-consumer decisions that pretty much made them a meme at this point. Recently, they announced a Dead Space remake, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I want to delve into a little bit of the history of the series as a whole, as well as the now defunct Visceral Games, the studio behind Dead Space. Now, when it comes to the survival horror genre, the original Dead Space is a staple that stood apart from its competition via the use of clever lighting effects, solid sound engineering, and grotesque enemy design, especially for the time. And speaking of enemy design, one of the most innovative gameplay aspects they introduced was making the necromorphs killable via dismemberment only. Up until this point, most zombie-type enemies could be dispatched by weapon or melee damage anywhere on the body. But by restricting it to the limbs, players had to switch up the way they fought. Now, when it comes to a game like this, in this genre, the player usually assumes the role of a character with a backstory that involves some sort of military or combat experience. But that's what makes this game so good. You play as a character who's just a guy. Isaac is an engineer with no combat experience who has to fight his way through a derelict ship full of deformed monsters with nothing but his engineering tools. And that's what makes the character so endearing during the first two installments. And then you get to Dead Space 3, where EA does what EA does best. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is to entrap, then suck the lifeblood out of a promising studio's IP until it becomes a barely recognizable husk of its former self, just to be tossed aside in favor of their next victim. Pretty sure I can make a Brittany Renner joke out of this, but I'm not going to do that. Dead Space 3 is where you start to see things falling apart. In an attempt to capitalize on the success of major first-person shooters, the game left behind its anxiety-inducing, horror-based formula in favor of a fast-paced, action-packed shooter, with the same microtransactions we all know and love. The combat system was completely revamped. Instead of relying on tools normally reserved for ship repair, we now had full-fledged weapons that were really only upgradable by grinding and loot boxes. Instead of thematically unpredictable and uncomfortable enemy encounters to keep us on our toes, we got more open space and waves of generic bad guys to shoot at repeatedly. The elements that made Dead Space into what it was weren't there anymore. In all fairness, this formula isn't inherently bad. I mean, after all, games like Call of Duty sell like hotcakes every year. But in regards to this series specifically, when you change the formula that made it into what it was by the third installment, you're gonna have problems. And oh boy, problems did it have. Despite the overall positive reviews the game received from groups like IGN and Metacritic, the number of units EA expected to move just wasn't met. Even a tie-in comic and animated movie weren't enough to make the series into the major movement EA expected. And because of this, the series as a whole and any possible sequels were put on hold in favor of other projects. After the release of Battlefield Hardline, Visceral Games started to succumb to lack of resources, proper staff, and low morale. On top of that, the industry started to shift more towards long-running MMO games that could continuously generate profit. For EA, there wasn't much profit in single-player games. And with that came the final nail in the coffin for Visceral Games, which was unfortunately shut down in 2017. And that brings us to today, where we are slated for not a remaster, but a full remake of Dead Space 1, which we can expect around August of 2022. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm divided on this. The Dead Space fanboy in me wants to get excited, but won't, because the cynical side of me will always remember EA's abysmal track record. And for the record, let's not act like this remake isn't a slap in the face of the original creators, Because at the end of the day, you have a large corporation that took a good franchise, beat it to the ground, killed off any hope for any future installments, and then proceeded to dismantle the studio just to resurrect the franchise that they killed and serve it to us in a nice new texture package. Which, by the way, I'm not gonna lie, it does look gorgeous. Which is saying something because the original Dead Space still graphically holds up even to today. And that's one thing I want to point out. We're currently living in the age of the remake slash remaster or reboot. While there are some older games that people still love to play that could or have benefited from a modern facelift, there lies a list of games that really don't need it, and anything beyond that would just be an obvious cash grab. Well, technically they all are, but you can kind of tell which companies somewhat care about their fan base. That being said, what can we expect out of this remake? Will this be an honest attempt at making up for the previous loot box riddled pile of dog shit we got before? Or is it just a one-off? Only time will tell. Will reviving the series make up for EA's past transgressions? No. But do we as consumers owe EA the benefit of the doubt? Also no. Look, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want the game to succeed, because I really do. I mean, who knows? They might actually pick up the story where we last left off, based on the success. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. If you guys like the sound of my voice, feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will check you guys later. AJ, signing out.